Professor Troy, thank you so much for joining us today for this interview. It's such an honor to have a musician as distinguished as yourself to join us for this interview. Thank you again very much, and I look forward to all the things that you'll be teaching us. So, I guess first off, you recently acquired a professor position at the University of Ottawa. Um, and I was just wondering, off of the top of my head, do you have any specific teaching philosophy?
Well, Chaos, thanks for having me, first of all. I'm super excited to speak with you. So let's just get right into it. With the professorship at the University of Ottawa, this is already now my fifth year in, but it still feels in some ways very new to me because I'm learning so much. You're
Especially because
asking,
you're so young for a professor position.
yeah, I was pretty young, and I'm learning so much just from my colleagues and also from students. My teaching philosophy, it's changed over the last couple of years, even when I first started. I think what I've noticed is a combination of things. Every student is different. And I'm realizing that as I teach, I have a different energy with each student. And I have to be very aware of that because some students need a lot of having holding their hands throughout the process, and some students do better with less holding hands. So I find that's the very first basis of my teaching philosophy is that it has to be tailored to each student, which is a lot of mental preparation and psychological fuel to be used. When it comes to the actual practicality of it, I think I'm an active performer and I perform a lot and play a whole bunch of repertoire. And right now, in the place where I am as a teacher, as a professor, and as a performer, I'm able to give some real life advice of how it's like to perform on stage and the really kind of putting it all together and actual practicalities of how to play the instrument stage of teaching. So I've realized, I'm really good at teaching certain parts of the violin and the violin as a philosophy and as an instrument, and to work with the student that way, and understanding also where I'm not so strong and who to recommend my students to seek out mentorship from another teacher. So my teaching philosophy, just to sum it all up, is it's very tailored to each student, and also I tend to teach my strengths right now, but I know that will also change throughout the years.
Right. And I know some teachers who like to emphasize specific aspects, regardless of the student, that they believe is helpful, in just for playing in general. So, do you have any of these, common tips that you find yourself coming back to in your lessons?
Yes. For me, there's some basic things that always need to be reminded, especially in that very, very important age between 18 and mid 20s. For me, it's the constant visit of basic fundamentals, which goes from scales, arpeggios, understanding how the vibrato works, posture, and really just understanding how to use your craft. And every lesson unfolds a new opportunity to discover something very deep. And I'm also shocked sometimes that I forget to tell certain very basic things that I've taken for granted. But I do think going back to the fundamentals with technique, scales, double stops, etudes, um, and just very basic concepts, I think always center and ground every student back to understanding why they're playing the violin.
So, do you think it's important to sort of hammer these details down every lesson, maybe even being excessive about it? Do you think that sort of teaching style helps?
I think it doesn't hurt to be a reminder to them. I wouldn't say hammer it down, but I
Hmm.
do remind my students that scales are very important,
Right.
and this is the time that And honestly, I mean, it's not to say it'll never happen again, but this is kind of the last time, especially when you're in university, to
Yeah.
really invest a lot of time
Hmm.
in in having a sense of purpose to perfect it. Because once you get out there and you perform and all that, you'll touch the scales, but life gets busy and you'll probably start to sacrifice and eat up into that. Although I recommend not to, but that's the realities of how things develop.
Of course, right. And more on just various types of teaching. Many teachers have, a lot of different styles. Some like to focus on technique, others more on the pieces, more on the musical expression. So, do you think that it's important for a student to have multiple teachers that want to have exposure to, a wide variety of pedagogical styles?
That really depends on the student as well.
Hmm.
I've worked with some students where I think it's best that it's just me and that student to work very intensely together for a defined period of time, and some where I've seen them flourish by having multiple concepts. So it really depends on the student.
Hmm.
For myself, I know that I like the one-on-one attention from one teacher. And if I wanted to learn from others, I would go during the summertime or non-school time to study with others or take the master class. But I like that consistency of working with one teacher,
Right.
and having that kind of um, you know dependability with one professor, one teacher, one faculty, whatever you call it, to kind of see the growth throughout the entire year.
Right. But it's important to sort of contextualize as well.
Yeah,
That's
and I
right.
know some students that just, and that's another thing. When you work with another student,
Hmm.
sometimes your language or your style of teaching just doesn't really click.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And I've seen that come throughout many different stages of a student's career as a student. And sometimes it just takes another teacher, another pair of ears to listen to someone else say the exact same thing, and suddenly they get it.
Hmm. Hmm. Has it ever occurred that maybe you have a student who takes maybe a summer session or a series of lessons from a teacher with a different style than you? Do you find that once they come back to you, their style sort of clashes with your philosophy? Or is that not really a problem for you?
For me, not so yet. I've heard some other teachers where it becomes a bigger issue the more that
Hmm.
you start to develop your own kind of
Right.
style of teaching. But I think so far not. If
Okay.
anything, it's only brought more inspiration into the room.
Mm. Mm. And of course, throughout your music education in your younger years, I mean, you've had a lot of different teachers. You've had a really broad, comprehensive education, um, and from these years, I'm sure you've gotten so much useful information and knowledge. But if you could sort of boil down the most important points, which you really had to internalize, um, would you be able to sum those up in a couple sentences or so? Might be a
Well,
tall order of a task.
well, I can give you kind of a sum of my different stages of studying, if that's
That
okay.
would also be wonderful.
So I would say from maybe, I mean, I don't remember so much when I was a child, but what I got out of it was consistency of
Hmm.
just playing all the time on a regular basis, whether that's 10 minutes one day or 1 hour the next day, it doesn't really matter. It's just to have that consistency throughout your youth in order to build some sort of discipline. And I
Hmm.
think that will carry very far. The second stage of my studying part was probably like my pre-teens to my early teens, so that about I would say 11 to 15 or so. That phase, I remember my teachers gave me a lot of confidence to perform and to really work in detail of all the technical stuff. So during that time, I worked with my teachers, Yugebu Yuxilin, Cindy Humphreys, and these are all teachers that were in my hometown, Bill Vandersloot. And then I also took some master classes with Pinkas Zuckerman at that time. And it was just so much about understanding how the instrument works.
Right.
And then from 15 onwards to the end of my bachelor's, I would say it was a lot of push, a good push. It was not easy, very uncomfortable because I was used to learning a concerto over 6 months,
Yeah.
but suddenly I had to learn it over 2 months
Hmm.
and perform it in studio class and studio recital for memory. And that intensity for me was very unnatural because I didn't come from that type of training, but I learned that I could do it. And now I know my threshold of what it takes to learn a piece. So I would say intensity and challenging yourself, especially that age, I think is pretty important to know and very special if you have someone that is able to constantly push you. But this is also, as I said, tailored to my
Right.
studying. And then I would say after my bachelor's, for my master's, it was being assured that I can make my own decisions musically, technically, artistically, performance wise as well. And what it does is it kind of just pulls all of that external energy internally, and you want to have kind of your limits pushed to the max.
Hmm.
But in my studies after my bachelor's, what it did was like, okay, we've seen the maximum, let's see what is sustainable.
Right.
So I know it kind of went all over the place, but different stages, and I think some have a recipe of different times and different types of pushing. Some people are pushed much earlier, some much later,
Mm.
and I think they all could work. But for me, that's how it happened for me.
And you mentioned learning a lot of that repertoire at really high intensity. Um, how did you manage to absorb all of that information, that knowledge, while staying grounded? And right now, of course, you also perform, so I'm sure you also have a lot of stuff going on. Like, what's the secret to staying in control?
Ah, it's a great question, Chaos. um, it's not easy. I'll put it that way. I'll just be
Yeah.
honest with you. It wasn't easy. I think I made a lot of mistakes. I lost focus, but you need to learn to lose
Mhm.
focus at that age as well. And I think I was surrounded by very supportive people, my family,
Mhm.
and great friends and mentors. So it never felt like I was alone in that way.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think at the end of the day, you just remember it's trying to see your limits. And what makes you uncomfortable makes you grow.
Mhm. Yes, definitely. Outside of the comfort zone is, yeah, part of where the magic happens, for sure. Right. And also earlier in the interview, you mentioned the importance of sort of preparing for concert playing, having that in mind when you're teaching or when you're practicing. How exactly does that translate practically for you? Just interested.
Well, practicing in a room and performing on stage are very similar, but they're not identical. I would
Mm.
say when you're performing on stage, there's a certain part of your brain that needs to activate, and a certain part of your brain that needs to actually stop working,
Mhm.
or at least be minimized. And I'll tell you a little bit what that is later. And same thing with the practice room. There are certain parts you need to turn on and off as well. So in the practice room, you have to really think about, for me at least, the present and the past. So what I mean by that is you're actively being in the moment, trying to understand what is going on, and also listening to yourself after you've played it, which is the past, right? So you're thinking about what just happened. But on stage, you got to go from present, which is being aware of what's going on right now, and also future. So you have to think ahead. And I don't know anybody that can think all three at the same time, but I think that's the biggest thing that I see a lot of my colleagues, but also students get muzzled by is this idea of switching that part of your brain from
Mhm.
present past to present future.
Mm.
And for me, that's a huge mind shift because if you don't change it, what happens is you start second guessing yourself.
Right.
So it's a psychological um, practice, but I highly recommend people to think about that because it really is so different. It's kind of the idea of being reflective versus just going for it.
And that sort of mindset shift, does that just come with experience?
I think it comes with experience for sure. It also comes from just being aware of that as well. And being a performer is a different set of skills than being just a great player. And not everybody is meant to be a performer, and that's absolutely fine, I think. And not every performer is meant to be a player. There are some people that perform extremely well, and some people that play extremely well, and they don't always go hand in hand. And there are some that do really well with both, and I think that's the recipe of a fantastic musician. But it also comes from a personality. So for me, it's a combination of just being aware of your strengths and working on it, and also what is your goal with it. And I know some students that just really do not have the personality to practice, but they can perform. Like you snap a finger, and wow, I'm like, I didn't know you could do that. And same with the vice versa. In the practice room or in the lesson, it is so amazing, but once they're on stage, it just falls apart. And that's where I try to help with understanding that, that there are two sides to it. And I think as a student, you should really try to work with to better both sides.
Right. And also when it comes to playing in general or performing, you often hear this sort of thing about having your own voice, like creating your own music, which I know is something you've also spoken about previously, leaving your own mark on the music you're playing. So how do you learn to do this? Because we have so many sources of information. I mean, you can listen to recordings online, you can watch lessons online, or you can have the lessons in person. But at the end of the day, what really constitutes this ownership of your playing? Do you think it's something innate?
No, I don't think it's something innate, but I do think it comes from a lot of personal reflections because performing on stage, playing music is an art. And like any art, I think we are always looking for the truth. Will we ever find it? I think that's a question mark. But I think it's never been easy to find your own voice because in a world that is so full of distractions, I think it's very hard not to be persuaded by a certain bias. And I don't think you will ever be free of bias. But I think the point is you got to understand at some point that your voice is your voice. And there's nothing to be ashamed of your voice if you work on it. And your opinion is your opinion. And it can be influenced absolutely by the surrounding factors. But I think it comes actually from a much deeper place than just playing. It comes from a sense of self and awareness and consciousness and a sense of strength as well. So, you know, if everybody, like, I'm just giving a very, very childish example, but you're at a restaurant and everybody's ordering the chicken, but you really want the beef, right? And if you really want the beef and you're not causing any harm to anybody, you need to be, I'm going to order the beef, right? So it's so easy, I think, sometimes, and it's just human nature that we want to conform with the popular opinion. But I think that's also why art is so admirable because it really questions our choices, our view of the world, and what is our voice. And, of course, it's an endless journey, and that's why art is never ending.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, art, it's this sort of thing that's created collectively by, multiple people, all of the people on this planet all at once, you could say, in one view. And of course, when it comes to violin playing, I mean, solo is not the only thing that matters, of course. I mean, there's chamber music as well, ensemble playing. And at least in my personal experience, it feels like solo music, when it comes to pedagogy and just general focus, seems to have a much higher importance than ensemble. And so I was just wondering, like, what is the importance of playing ensemble? Like, how does it actually help? Because, I mean, you play with the piano accompaniment when you're playing concertos, sonatas, etc. But, I mean, what's the sort of difference you have between this sort of accompaniment mindset and this sort of collaborational mindset?
Excuse me.
That's,
Well, yeah, I think you need both. I think I've seen
yeah.
some performers when they do too much collaboration, they lose their own sense of voice.
Yeah.
And then same thing, if they do too much solo work, they lose a sense of collaboration. I have experienced both. I wouldn't say one is more common than the other, but there's benefits to both so much. I think let's start with the first one. If they play a lot of solo, what happens is it builds a certain character in the way that you play. So a lot of good stuff, great confidence, a sense of like leadership, because you do have to lead a herd, whether when you're playing concerto, a showpiece, it does really refine your point of view and your voice as well, as I mentioned. But the cons to that is because you have to lead a herd so much, it's sometimes hard to compromise. And I think that's very important to be able to compromise and to listen. So that's where chamber music and collaborative work is so important, because it forces you to listen to someone else. And that is very important because as much as you want to be right, you're never right all the time. You can influence. It makes you negotiate. And the same thing, if that's sometimes it's too much, right? Someone needs to lead at the end of the day, and it's a balance. So you try to do a little bit of both. It's not easy because it's a very different mindset. I personally find switching from solo playing to chamber music actually extremely difficult.
So, actually, before that, I wanted to know, do you do you distinguish between like large ensemble playing and small ensemble playing? Like between like a quartet
Yeah,
versus an orchestra? Like, do you think they teach you different mindsets?
I think they should. I think every collaboration is different. Solo, of course, it's you really are leading the herd. When you play Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto, all eyes on you. You have to shape it the way you want. You have to go with your tempo, no compromise. Of course, you work with the group, but at the end of the day, you are the person that have to make the ultimate decision. Then you have collaboration with piano, for violin piano. I'm using that as my specifics. You also have to work together, but at least it's only two people.
Right.
So there is a sense of either this way or that way, and you make do with it. In an ensemble, small ensemble like a quartet, the more people it is, the more complicated it becomes as well. Then you have to compromise a lot more, which I think is a wonderful thing and challenging at the same time, because no four people will have the same opinion about something, and you just have to agree to disagree sometimes, or you agree to agree. And when you play in large ensemble, the funny thing about that, it kind of is more similar to playing a solo situation again, because now you have a leader,
Yeah.
a conductor. So in some ways, it's very similar to the solo, but the complete opposite. So you become more into the herd as opposed to the leader, and I think that makes you follow very well. Not always the way you want to, but it teaches you how to follow as well, and I think that's very important. So yes, I think, and everything in between as well. There are different types of listening in each type of ensemble playing.
And when it comes to sort of like quartets, quintets, that sort of smaller chamber environments, of course, there's compromise and there's discussion, and you need to raise your voice, but you need to also, stay quiet sometimes. So, in name, it's very easy. It's very easy to say, just we'll compromise whenever problems arrive. But how exactly do you do that? Because when you're in the heat of the moment and you feel very passionately about whatever the music may be, how do you sort of navigate that?
Well, I think it's common professionalism to never get heated. And I think
True.
there needs to be a sense of respect amongst all four or five, how many musicians you're in. It's not easy. And I think that's why I have huge respect for every single quartet out there that has stayed together for more than a couple of months, because it's not easy,
Yeah.
first of all. And I think all four people has to be willing to compromise and to lead at the same time. So in a situation like that, hopefully it comes with the idea that everybody wants the whole thing to be for the better. So that nobody is going in there with a sense of like, I want to pull something down, or I don't want to end up good. Hopefully everybody's intention, whether it comes out across good or bad, is for it to be better. So as long as that is secure and safe, I think everything on top of that, you can leave it in the room, and then that's part of the rehearsal process, is to decide.
And I actually want to focus on that phrase, to be better. I mean, you oftentimes hear people saying music is very subjective. There's no objective right or whatever. So besides, obvious inaccuracies or obvious misinterpretations, let's say you're practicing by yourself and you have conflicting ideas on how a phrase should be played, let's say. How do you sort of decide what is better? Like, does better even exist, or is it just something you go with when you're feeling it?
Better, huh? Yeah, it's another great question about art that I'm not quite sure if I can give you a very direct answer, but I
Great
can give you
question,
some
yeah.
qualities. Yeah, these are fantastic questions, Chaos. Better, what does it mean? I think better will never be perfect, so we just have to accept that. But better is, in some ways, how can I use what I have in the image of what I want to create work and be communicated to the audience or to a recording or whatever it is. So for me, being better is not so much about like is it metrically, like measurably better?
Yeah.
But for me, it's like, am I able to communicate seamlessly from where I have the image of what I'm thinking about this part through my hands and body seamlessly to communicate with the audience? That's my idea of what better means,
So
especially in
again, it
music.
sort of comes back to the idea of having a voice, to a mark in the music, right? Okay.
Right.
And then also, I know you played duets with your older brother, who was also a violinist, and I think it's very interesting because sometimes you see sibling trios or duos, and I was just wondering, do things change because you're playing with a family member? Like, is there some sort of connection, or does it become actually more difficult because you guys know each other better? You guys can be more open with each other.
Both, but generally better, I would say. I mean, we have a long life ahead of us, so
Right.
anything could happen, and we're aware of that, but generally better. The nice thing about when I play with my brother is so often when you play in a chamber music setting, especially if you're not in a kind of quartet or trio that's formed, is it's a beautiful connection, but it's never quite long lasting because you change players and you never really know when you're going to play with that person next, which is a nice thing in some ways, but there's a sense of longing because you work so well together, and the next time you play this piece with someone else, you don't really
Right.
have an opportunity to follow up. With my brother, the nice thing is that we've been playing some of these pieces since we were kids, and every single time it just grows together in that same direction. And it's a partnership that we've had, and it's just to go outside of music as well, it has helped us with our connection to each other as siblings because it blends our two worlds together in a beautiful way. It can also be an ugly way for some people, but in us, it's a beautiful way. So that's the part where we try to protect that as much as possible. And we play together a lot, but also we make sure that we have our own time to get individually as well, so that when we do play together, we're kind of shaping our duo in a way that helps feed it to grow.
Right. Again, the importance of balance. Right. Right. Exactly. And so just switching gears a little bit here, I wanted to ask a few questions about competition recording prep because, I mean, it's winter. There's a lot of stuff going on for music students, auditions, competition submissions, whatnot. And you've won some of the foremost violin competitions in the world, music competitions in the world, not even just violin. And of course, competing is it's a very difficult process, right? There's a lot of highs and lows. And I was just wondering, right off the bat, what have you learned from sort of partaking in these competitions and having that feeling of being a winner?
Oh, um, Huh. What is it like to be a winner? That's the question, I guess.
Yeah, and does that feeling of victory affect you when maybe you don't win the next time?
Uh, that's a good question too. Okay, so I will be as frank as I can. I think when you win something, it does definitely help validate a lot of the work that you've done. But surprisingly, it doesn't last as long as you might think.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
I would say in the moment, absolutely, it feels like the whole world is in your hands.
Right.
But I would say it starts to deplete within a week, if not
Hmm.
sooner. Not to say that it becomes less important, but you realize that it didn't, it's not like you changed as a person.
Hmm.
You kind of just were validated in the sense that this group of jury, this panel,
Hmm.
this day was chosen out of all the other days and all the other situations,
Hmm.
which is in some ways very lucky,
Right.
not in the sense of like it's a luck of the draw, but the opportunity matched with the situation, with the context of everything, and it happened to be bingo in a formulated way. Uh,
Right.
and I would say the thing is that as humans, I think we tend to move the goalposts very fast.
Yeah.
So especially I think anybody that does a competition, they're highly ambitious, whether it's from someone else kind of helping you push for that or from yourself, you're putting yourself out there to be judged, which
Hmm.
is very commendable, admirable, and very personal at the same time. So what I've learned is, you know, competitions. Do I agree with them or not? I would say generally it's like money, I guess. It's like it can be good, it can be bad at the
Hmm.
same time. If you choose it with the right intentions, it can be a fantastic opportunity. If you choose it for the reasons that, cause a lot of pain, cause a lot of shame and
Hmm.
judgment, because that's the nature of the competition as well. So it really takes a very strong mindset to come out of these competitions with a healthy attitude. Um, yeah, so and it's changing too. Like a lot of people, I think, are doing more competitions than ever
Yeah.
because of just the sheer amount of information that's available now.
Hmm.
I would say, I mean, during my time, it was very, very aware, but in some ways, it was like unless you were like super prepared, you wouldn't even put a chance in. I think now everyone is like, that's their goal. They want to win a competition.
Right.
And then even before my generation, I would say it was even a different mindset as well. So every generation seems to have a different relationship with competitions.
Hmm. Right. So I mean, there's always this factor of luck involved, right? Like win or lose, you should have this mindset that, I mean, of course, do not, don't disregard your own efforts, but of course, you shouldn't be disheartened by the fact that if you lose, maybe you were just not lucky, or maybe, music is a subjective thing, right? Maybe the
Yeah, it's
judges just didn't.
hard. And the
Yeah.
thing about the hard part on top of all of that is that music is so personal.
Yeah. Hmm.
So it's very hard to not take things personally.
Right. That's true.
So, I would just say to anybody that does competitions, you know, go for it,
Hmm.
but, also be careful with how you
Yeah.
you take it, whether you win or if you lose. Because I know some people that have won, and that becomes the only thing that
Yeah.
they flash. And likewise, if they don't win, the only thing they know that they're a loser. And I don't think that's a healthy mindset in either way.
Right. Right. Healthy motivation is the key.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when it comes to the flip side of actually preparing for those competitions, I mean, as we've discussed, music is highly personal, but I mean, I'm sure that there are things that most judges will at least look for, so sort of these qualities that judges value in a player. What sort of emphasis or emphases should an aspiring competition participant try to work on when they're practicing? Like, is it musicality? Is it specific aspects of the technique? Even just stage presence, posture?
I think when you're doing a solo competition, stage presence plays a bigger role than
Mm,
most people factor in,
mm,
because when you when we listen to performers on stage, we are also looking at them. And, I do, that's the reason why it's not under a black curtain.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
because your visual representation and how you move with the music is adding a layer of how we listen to it as well. It's like when you serve food, it's the presentation is, it might be superficial, but it's extremely important.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
which
Of
plate do you
course.
choose? What kind of greenery do you add on top of it, or the lack of greenery as well? And so for me, stage presence is extremely important. Also, the ease of the instrument, because I'm not saying that things have to look easy, but they shouldn't make me feel uncomfortable in a
Shouldn't be
negative way.
stressful to watch.
Yeah, stressful. I'm not saying that there can't be intensity, but it should be coming from an artistic value as opposed to, ooh, I don't know if they're going to make it through this entire performance.
Sure. Of course. And when it comes to stage presence, what do you think factors in? Is that the facial expressions? Do you think that plays a big part?
No, it could be.
Could be.
That's absolutely a factor, but I think it's an
Overall
energy.
movement?
It's an energy. Yeah. Now, I know
Energy.
some people that move a lot, and I know some people that don't move at all, but I think that comes from I mean, going back to what we were talking about, it's kind of sticking to your own lane,
Right.
and at least being aware of your own voice. I think it all comes from there to have that consciousness. Whether you are someone that is dancing around or someone that is as still as a rock, it doesn't really matter. But it's very, very evident, and I can say with amongst a lot of my colleagues, we usually know when someone is is discovering that, or have found that, or is in the process of working it. It's very, very noticeable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think, I know this might be difficult, but let's say you had to sort of quantify maybe the sort of weight you give to the visual presentation versus maybe the tonal quality, the technicality aspects. What sort of like weight would you give to the different categories?
Well, the technical part, I think, it depends on the competition, I
Right,
guess.
right, of course.
Because sometimes
Paganini
everyone
or
is
yeah,
playing so well, it
right.
just, I mean, then the bar is very high. Then it's
Yeah,
like maybe a few
yeah.
factors. And sometimes the level is all over the place. So having someone that's just really solid is good enough as
Right,
well.
right.
But I would say in any situation, there has to be a sense of foundation. Like the plane's got to be solid. And everything after that is the really artsy part where it's like hard to describe, but, and that's also a taste of the jury member too. So it really depends.
Right. So would you say that before you worry about the embellishments, you really have to nail that technique down
Oh yeah.
to be considered?
And especially in a competition, yes. If
Right.
you're a performer and you want to build your brand that way, I would say maybe it's a bit different. But if you want to go through the competition route, definitely the planes are going to be solid.
And of course, there are differences between in-person competitions versus recording tapes for, let's say, an audition to an orchestra, to a conservatory. What differences mainly in your experience have you noticed between the two? Because sometimes you have to focus on different aspects of your playing to sort of stand out. Maybe in competitions when you're playing live, it's okay to make extraneous noise, for example, because it's not as easily heard. But in recordings, you have to sort of tone that down. So what sort of differences do you find important to consider when you're in different scenarios?
I'm going to speak from personal experience because I've I need to have a bit more experience with the live competition
Right.
rounds. I've done a lot of pre-screening stuff. This might be really basic, but the angle of the camera makes a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's because, you know, we're not there in person, and I wish everything could be in person, but when you're recording, it makes a big difference if you are, 3 feet away from me, or if you are 300 feet away from me, and no matter how good it sounds, you want to give a fair assessment. So that's the first thing I would say. in a live performance, it's different. You're working with the ambience, you're working with the whole vibration of the live situation. So I think, that's one thing to really think about when you're doing recording is make sure that you can give the jury an opportunity to give a fair assessment. Yeah. In terms of playing, um, I mean, I can't say too much. I mean, both has to be solid.
Right.
I think, yeah, that's really hard to say. I would say
Yeah.
everybody has a different recording situation, and just be yourself in the best way possible.
And have you had experience with not exactly sitting on a jury, but at least sort of being in a position where you evaluate videos that are sent in to you?
Yes, I have.
And when you look at those tapes, what sort of qualities do you look for? Or what sort of things do you pay most attention to?
It depends. In a competition, depending on what kind of competition, maybe give me an example.
Let's say you're well, what have you looked
I've
over?
done professional competitions, some of the big ones. I was in the jury for Paganini competition for the pre-selection committee. I've done, of course, audition tapes from my university. That's for a student to come into my studio. Some summer music programs as well.
Maybe we
There,
say for now we just take it at the pre-screening round of a big competition.
okay.
What sort of gets you through the gates?
Well, yeah, that's a good one. So there's so many competitors usually, first of
Right.
all, and it depends on the competition and the repertoire. So I would say on the baseline level, whether the competition level is high, medium, or low, I look just for solid playing. Whether they get around the instrument well, they have their technique well formed, good musical sense, and then it varies depending on the pool of applicants. Because when you're judging a competition, it's not out of context; it's the context within all the applicants.
Right.
If all the applicants are super strong, then oh my gosh, that's a painful type of situation to be in because you've got to actually nitpick through such amazing players, and it breaks my heart when I have to do that. But luckily, it's never by myself. It's with usually a bunch of other people
Yeah.
that have to do this. And sometimes the level of the competition in the pool is not very high. So, that's another opportunity for people to kind of just check. Sometimes, you never know what kind of pools of applicants you're going to be part of. So, yeah, I think, regardless of it, the more solid the playing, the higher chance that it's going to be a smooth
Right.
going
Regardless
forward.
of the setting.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I just want to just sort of wrap things up because I know it's been quite a while for you with a meta question about classical music in general. Because at Project Click, we know that classical music, especially for younger kids, can be perceived as, like this niche elitist thing where only certain people, rich people, play it. And then previously online, I've read that you've mentioned the importance of sort of, bridging this gap between pop culture music and classical music, having a sort of wider audience of this genre. So, what exactly do you think can be done to, help this resolve this problem?
There's so many things that one can do. Basically, the idea is to bring the music to people as well. That's the basic, most raw concept, I think, is if people don't know about it, they won't pay attention to it. We're not I mean, that's why it can be elitist, because if we don't reach out,
Right.
only those who know about it will learn about it. Or it's the more exclusive it is, the more it's tended to a small pool of people.
Right.
It depends. So my relationship with community outreach is constantly changing. I think there are some parts that we absolutely need to reach out to people so that they can understand and appreciate classical music. And there's also some parts where it should be kept in a concert hall. Not everything needs to be for everybody. It's
Right.
impossible. It's like saying a one
Of
size fits
course.
all.
Yeah.
But I think there's so much more that we can do with classical music to reach out to the general public. It's part of our history as human species. It's an amazing and wonderful invention. that it just takes someone to introduce it to them. And music is so abstract, but yet at the same time it speaks to the soul and to the ears and the human prototype just so quickly that it's the one thing that, I think really, it brings us back to memories very quickly. It
Right.
makes us understand and makes us listen. It really does awaken our listening, our visual, and if you play it, physical senses as well. So I highly recommend that every person out there as a musician have that somehow in the back of their pocket, whether they want to do it now or later. I love what you're doing. You're already reaching out. But in order for us to grow and not even grow, but just to maintain
Hmm.
the audience that we have, we need to continue to share that this art form with people. Otherwise, I don't think it'll ever die, but it'll shrink.
Right. 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 It's always on both sides. There are always benefits to everyone. I mean, there's always something healthy about having just, classical music around, not necessarily even just playing it. Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was a really
Of
insightful,
course.
really interesting interview.
Thank you, Chaos.
Thoughtful
Yeah,
responses. Yeah, thank you so much.
appreciate it. Thanks for asking me.
And we hope to have you back with us soon,
Yeah.
maybe even in person.
Yes, let's do it in person next time.
Yes, absolutely. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.